When you've lived through trauma, who are you can be very hard to answer. Sometimes it can even feel impossible. I used to tell myself, maybe if I hadn't gone through the things I went through as a child, I would be somebody different, somebody normal. But what does normal even mean when your first memory is hunger and your second is fear? I was born in Nigeria. I never knew my biological parents. They moved to another country and left me behind. I grew up in extreme poverty. I slept on concrete floors since the age of 5 years old. One meal a day if I was lucky. I shared a room with 3 other families. We shared everything. When I was 5, while other kids my age were playing pretend, I was being introduced to my future husband. He was 10 years older than me. This would be my way out of poverty. But one day, something changed. My family got an offer to send me and a sister that I didn't even know existed to Ireland. You'll meet your biological parents, they said. You'll have a better life, they promised. I had never left my village. But with no choice and no adults with us, we set off on a journey that most people wouldn't even survive. Now, don't ask me how we didn't get lost. Honestly, I don't know. We arrived in Ireland, and without care in the world, we ran around the airport, waiting for the parents who we've never seen, voices we've never heard. Next thing you know, I heard somebody yelling, "Destiny, stop running around." I turned and saw a man standing right in front of me. He looked just like me. I thought, could these be my parents? Beside him was a woman holding a baby. Now, if this was a fairy tale, I would tell you we lived happily ever after. But this is not a fairy tale, and our nightmare had just begun. For 5 years, we lived through things that still haunt me. Child trafficking, physical abuse, and neglect. I went from a hungry child who could survive on 1 meal a day to a child who would eat mud, chalk, even the walls in my house, just to stop the hunger. I was trapped, screaming in silence, and nobody could hear me. At 11 years old, I was placed into foster care. I thought, this is it. I would have a normal life. But I was wrong again. See, a new type of pain found me. Her name was trauma. She didn't just knock, she moved right in. Scars started to show that weren't even on my body. I couldn't understand who I was becoming. See, trauma doesn't just break things. It builds things too. It builds masks. It builds walls. It builds identities that make you feel safe. but aren't really you. And when the world is clapping for your survival story, you're still asking, do they know who I really am? For most of my childhood, I remember I would watch other children and think what it would be like to be them. Most mornings, I would watch my next door neighbor from across the room, across the street, just further away from me. From where I sat, I could see her getting ready for school, picking her outfits, fixing her hair, eating her breakfast. I always thought how these were her biggest issues, but my mornings were so different. I was asking myself questions like, how do I cover the bruise on my leg? How do I hide the scars on my back? Have my sister eaten? Are they ready and dressed? Have I packed their lunch? I always wondered, what would it be like to be a child that didn't have so many worries? I remember watching a TV show called Hannah Montana. I watched this young girl open up a fridge and take food, something I couldn't do. Her biggest problems was making friends, fighting with them, learning and growing. I thought to myself, if I could get away from my parents, I would be Hannah Montana. So when I was 11 years old, I found the courage to tell somebody what was happening to me. A fresh start. I moved to a new city. I had a new family and a new school. But with that came new problems. I had no friends. I was struggling to connect with people. I was terrified of men, especially men that were older than me. I couldn't read and I couldn't write. I was years behind. And I was struggling to sleep. I was plagued by nightmares every single night. I started developing different personalities. With friends, I was one person. At home, somebody else. In school, somebody completely different. I sat in a therapist's office for 6 years trying to make sense of it all. I lived with my foster parents for years, and they always treated me like one of their own. And I could never understand why this was not enough to stop the pain. And that's when I realized changing your circumstances does not take away the trauma. When I was 16, I was placed into an adult mental institution. By 19, I was homeless. I remember driving around my social worker, desperately trying to find a place for me to sleep that night. I was thinking to myself, this was not where I saw my life going. Something needs to change. In 2019, that change came. I got a 3-year scholarship to start a university course. I remember thinking, this was more money than I've ever seen in my whole entire life. I knew what it was like working every single day of your life and barely getting by. I didn't want to waste this opportunity on just myself. I felt like I could do so much more. Every year, the annual statistics for sexual violence and domestic violence comes out. But yeah, how accurate are they? I knew the power of shame and silence, and how many of us are scared to tell our stories. What would these statistics actually look like if every man, child, and woman were to actually tell their stories? Would they be higher? This became the driving force for why I created Mind the Gap Ireland, Ireland's first ever online anonymous story platform for survivors of sexual violence. It started with just me, a social media platform, and a request for people to share their stories. It didn't stay small for long. Soon enough, I had a dedicated team supporting me. Then we had people across Ireland sharing their stories with us, and we shared these stories globally. What I didn't expect was the amount of people that wrote to us that were between the ages of 5 and 12 when they experienced sexual violence and were now in their 40s and 50s before they told their stories. We all know the power that sexual violence holds on people and how hard it is to shake that off. It can be the shame that many of us carry. And sometimes it can take a lending hand to let that shame go. I get asked all the time, how did you overcome it all? And honestly, every single one person in this room today has gone through something difficult and had to fight to not let that become the person that they are, to be more than that. All I can ask of you today is, if you were to do one thing, is to always be curious about the ways that trauma shapes people, to be patient with people when they're healing, and to show compassion is the most important gift you can give to somebody. See, no two stories are ever the same, and the way people heal are always going to be different. Thank you.